I just love creating in polymer clay, and I'm always looking for new objects to cover with polymer clay. Today we're going to use wooden picture frames, which can be tricky, but I'll give you some tips so you can have great success making this project using supplies from the Floral Create-Along box. Hi there, Sandy Huntress here. So we're going to build our project on this wooden picture frame. Now there's a few things you should know about working with polymer clay and wood. First of all, consider the kind of wood you have. This is plywood. You can tell by looking at the side that it is made of several layers, or plies, and they are glued together. So this is going to be more stable than just a solid piece of wood. But regardless, wood does expand and contract. If you have a solid piece of wood, you may be able to drive off some of the moisture by putting it in the oven for a while before you put your polymer clay on it. But you still don't want to wrap a piece of wood completely with polymer clay because the wood may expand and your clay will crack or crack off. Now this stuff, as I said, is made of plies which are glued together. And so far so good with this one. I put this in the oven for a time and the glue didn't fail, but do be careful because it can be kind of stinky. So I baked it in my usual 2 roasting pans, one upside down on top of each other, held with clothespins on the 4 sides. I let it cool off before I opened it. Because we don't want to bake this too much lest it fall apart, we're going to use a couple techniques to help us apply our polymer clay pieces without this piece spending much time in the oven. Because we're not covering the entire thing in polymer clay, the first thing you want to do is paint it so you'll have a nice finish. Of course, I don't even have to say it, but I will. You can do this project in any colors you like. I'm just going to do a light ivory. And I should mention, these are very inexpensive frames. You can get them for about $1 at the craft store. And they come with these little wooden pegs that you just put back here. And then you can put it either landscape or put it down here for portrait. So if you do a design on your frame that's directional, remember that the hole is going to go at the bottom so that your frame will stand up. Notice that I painted every bit of this frame, all of the inside and back surfaces. And by the way, if you just move these little tabs so they're at like a 45-degree angle, then you'll be able to get both surfaces. Once you've painted it, you want to give it a light sand. This is just a 400 grit sanding sponge, and you'll be amazed at how much nicer your piece feels after even just that much, what you just watched me do. It really makes a difference. Sometimes these inexpensive frames can have rough bits on the edges. That will just knock it down, wipe off the sanding dust, and give it a second coat of paint so that you have a very nice finish. The next thing you want to do is to plan your design, and I just have a piece of cardstock here. I'm going to trace the shape of my frame. And then I can start planning. My plan is to use this Fleur stencil from the Floral Create-Along box. And I want to put some of the flowers in the corners and some of the leaves. And so you just draw and trace out until you have a design that you're happy with. As you can see, here is the design that I made. I already cut out a piece because I'm going to use this for a template. My plan is to have the fleur design in 2 opposite corners, and I'm going to use the silk screen that comes in the floral box. This is Folk Floral. I'm going to put that in these 2 spaces with just some strips of color in between, dividing them. For the design I sketched out, you will need 2 sheets of this silk screen design. You just place your silk screen with the colored side down. In this case it's blue. And the lovely thing about using a silk screen on polymer clay is that it sticks, so you don't have to worry about leakage. Just burnish it down lightly. Add a line of paint at the top, and then use a card to just squeegee the paint across the silk screen. It's very satisfying. Your silkscreen will be full of paint, so make sure that you peel it off and wash it off right away so that the paint doesn't dry in your silkscreen, because that will ruin it. Leave that aside for a little while and allow the paint to dry completely. And this is where your drawing and your template comes in. I'm just going to make a mark on the side I want to use and X off the other side. I'm not going to worry about having it go in a particular direction because my frame can be used portrait or landscape, so I'm actually going to do it at a little bit of an angle. You can cut these angles just with a blade. Then use a craft knife to cut a little bit outside that line. This just gives you some wiggle room when you're placing this on your frame. These pieces with the paint, I'll just mix them back up again. The clay might have a slight pink tint. In fact, this clay here did have some of the pink mixed in with it, and it's fine. I would go ahead and use that on another project. Just going to bend my tabs flat again so they are out of my way. And once more, refer to my sketch to see where I want to place this. So in the upper left corner. Oh, did I just do that? No, I can cut that down. Okay, that'll be okay. Thankfully. All right. Place that where you want on your frame and make sure you put it in the right place, because I did this wrong and now my design's messed up, so pay attention. Flip it upside down on a tile. I'm just going to move this one out of the way for a moment. Make sure I have that where I want it. Place it on a tile and use a nice sharp blade to trim right along the edge of your frame. Lift that up, and if it doesn't come with your frame, just gently peel it up. Be careful not to distort it, and place it back in place. And that looks, I'm going to trim that. I messed up that corner. So I'm just going to give this a little trim. It'll just be a little shorter. No big deal. That looks pretty good. Now I want to add some strips of color to this. We're going to add flowers in a bit, and I've rolled out some clay for leaves and flowers. By the way, this clay is rolled out on a number 5 setting on my pasta machine, about 1.5 millimeters thick. So first I'm going to cut a clean edge. And then I'm going to cut a strip, maybe a little less than 1/8 of an inch. And if you cut straight down and then just pull it towards you, you can see it sticks to the blade. And that lets you pick it up and place it without distorting it. It may not want to come off the blade, but if you kind of lean it, and yeah, sometimes it works better than others. This green clay seems to be sticky because that's the one that was giving me trouble. There we go. You can use your blade to kind of tell it to behave. Okay, I'm going to repeat with some more of this pearl clay. And finally with some pink that I'm going to use for a flower. I think that is a straight edge, but Better to make a straight edge. Not very straight, is it? Come on. There we go. And repeat on this other side as well. So I have the other side done. I'm just going to use a little bit of paper and lightly burnish that in place. I'd like to make it stick without distorting those nice straight lines. And then, as before, flip it over and trim. And if you trim from, if you think of this as an inward pointing V, if you trim from the V out, I found you get a cleaner cut. If you go the other way, this way, these tend to follow your blade and get a little distorted. So I'm actually going to pick it up and turn it so I can easily cut the other way. Now this is the part where I will bake it on the frame for just 30 minutes, just enough to bake this piece. In the case of this one that I did earlier, which I did on the wrong side, so pay attention. This one is not coming, well those are, but this piece is not coming up from the frame easily. So I may lift up what will lift up and add a little E6000 glue under it. E6000 because it's flexible. So if the wood should move a little bit, the pieces will be fine because the glue is flexible. But this is not coming up easily. If it pops off easily after baking, then just glue it back on. Repeat to add your silkscreen bit to the other side. Here's this portion of the design done. Now we can set this aside and prepare our flowers and leaves. Now we'll use our sheets of clay to cut out the leaves and flowers using the Floral stencil. You want to put these on a ceramic tile that you are going to bake them on. That way you don't risk picking them up and distorting them. Just use a craft blade and cut around each of the designs you want. Cut out the stems too. And if you like, you can add some texture to your leaves. I have here, this is the small etch and pearl tool, but you can use any needle tool. I thought this was interesting. It's a little thicker than a lot of needle tools, and it gave kind of a different sort of line. I guess more of a folky look. So I'm just making my little leaf marks. And I'm doing this while the other clay is still there, so I don't end up stretching and distorting my leaves. So you would do this for as many as you need. For my design, I need 4 repeats of this 8 leaf pattern. So a total of 32 leaves. Once you have them all cut out and textured, you can just pull up the excess clay. Whoop. If you do it a little bit more carefully than I just did, and you can also just roll a sneak of clay if you want for the stem. But if you do it a little bit more carefully than I just did, you can leave it stuck to the tile. For the flowers, we're going to use the design a little bit differently. We're not going to cut out this interior part. It's just too delicate. So instead, what we'll do is use that to make an impression. I'm going to also add some texture to the outer part of my flower with just a texture sponge. This is a bit of aquarium filter, which makes a nice all-over texture, and I just want to texture those 5 petals. And also make sure that I'm pressing this interior bit down firmly. Then again, use your clay blade and carefully cut around each of those petals. just the outside line. Also use your blade to cut out that center and remove it. Remove the stencil, and now you have that smooth part contrasting with the sponge texture. Use your blade and just connect those two lines towards the center between each of the petals. Just kind of putting my blade on one side and then giving it a spin. And just like with the leaves, we'll make sure we don't distort our flower by peeling away the excess and leaving that on the tile. I've got a little bit of yellow clay. Then I'm just going to roll in a ball and put in there and give a little bit of texture to. You can also kind of smooth out those cut edges if you need to. It's a little messy, so let's see if we can get rid of that. You can even take your finger and kind of gently smooth out any rough bits of the flower. For a final touch, you can add some mica powders. These also came in the Floral box. I'm adding it lightly with the finger just to that outer textured bit. You can skip this if you don't want the sparkle. And because I have it, I'm going to add some yellow to the centers. Do be careful when you open these. It's so easy to open them upside down. Just look for the threads. The threads are on top. And use any kind of tool, a little brush. This is just a little silicone tip tool to add some powders to the center. For this design, I need 6 flowers. So then you can bake everything. The flowers on the tile, the leaves on the tile, and the frame with its bits of clay for 30 minutes at the manufacturer's recommended temperature. Here are some of my leaves and flowers out of the oven. You can just use a clay blade to gently release them from the tile. And if you don't, they may break, but if they do, you should be able to just glue it back together because you're going to glue it onto the frame. These leaves are all directional, so I'm going to try to keep them in their groupings, but you can figure it out. So here's my frame, and we'll put a flower in the corner. And you can use the template to help you position all of your leaf pieces. Or you can just position them however you like. They don't have to be exactly the same. You could actually take this stencil and use a pencil and lightly draw on, although you will have to change the spacing a little because notice here, if you do this exactly as this is designed, these ones are going to overlap. So these need to scooch down just the tiniest bit. So you just get them in place. Use E6000, just little dabs of E6000 on the back of each of these to glue them. And then you have a really nice wooden picture frame, a very inexpensive base for a project. Wouldn't this be just a lovely gift for somebody? This is Sandy Huntress for Create Along, wishing you